So as a founder, you should be always on guard against these three common mistakes. The first mistake is not building a minimum viable product. You don't want to be offering just any kind of value to your target user. You want to be offering the kind of value that would make them adopt a product that is yet to be proven, a product from a company that is early stage and as a result may not provide the most polished user experience. Usually, what you offer has to address a pain point that would encourage someone to test out an unproven product from an early company. A lot of companies, a lot of founders instead just build whatever they think is a good idea using some technology that they think is going to distinguish them, when in fact, usually it's what you offer as a potential solution to a pain point. That is what distinguishes you, not so much what you offer as a new technology, because at the end of the day, what drives adoption is not what your feature is, but what it can do for the people who will be paying for your product. What problem does it help solve? And if your minimum viable product does not offer any sort of value that addresses a pain point that is painful enough to encourage action on the part of the user, then people are not going to adopt your product, and you are not going to get the adoption you expected for what you've launched. And of course, that really depends on the problem you're trying to solve. Just make sure you're offering something that actually addresses a very significant component of the problem you've decided to solve. The second thing is to think that you should be building for everyone starting off because you want to show everyone that you are going to be a big company. Thinking that you have to address every single potential user's pain points, every variation of this pain point for everyone. Let's say you have a finite amount of energy to devote to solving this problem. And instead of focusing it on one subset of users and creating that word of mouth that will then get you the adoption of the more general market, instead you divide this energy up across multiple user segments. And as a result, no one user segment feels served by your company. They feel like you're just trying to go for them, but then you're going for another group of users, and that you're just trying to go and fish for whatever attention you can get for your product, and you're just taking a scattershot approach. No one segment is going to feel like you actually care for their needs, and as a result, they're probably not going to trust your company, not going to trust your product, because you haven't shown that you're completely devoted and focused on their set of pain points. Instead, you're just trying to go for whatever user segment responds best to your product and decides to give it a try. That is not the approach to create the word of mouth that will then get that general adoption for your product. So instead of spreading your efforts across multiple user segments, focus on one very core group of users, a small segment of your eventual market. And if you look at all these companies out there, all these big companies right now, they didn't think they were going to be big eventually. They started with a very small group of users, a very specific user segment, and grew from there through word of mouth from this specific group. If you look at Airbnb, they focused on people who wanted to go to conventions and wanted cheaper accommodation, which is how Airbnb got its start. You should be focusing on this core group of users, serving them instead of trying to go for every single potential person in your market. And the third mistake is taking too long to iterate, thinking that you should be shipping product every quarter or every few months, not every week or even every half a week. Shipping product is how you learn from your users, not shipping any product though, but shipping product based on previous user learnings. Every time you ship a piece of product to a user, you learn based on their feedback through their actions, not what they say. Based on these learnings from their actions, you can then modify your product to see if you are moving the metrics you want to move in the right direction. If it's a paid product, then it's probably going to be paid number of users, the growth rate for that paid number of users, and also the growth rate of the churn rate, the number of users who leave. How quickly is that growing? You want to ship product as fast as possible so that you can correct things as fast as possible. It's better to ship pieces of a product instead of an entire product. Just because you think your product is not finished does not mean your users are going to be waiting around. Sometimes you have partners who are waiting for you to launch so that they can tell their audience about your product. Sometimes you just have users who are waiting for something that your product is supposed to offer before they decide on whether to use your product or not. If you don't ship fast enough, these users might leave. But outside of that, you might also want to consider how shipping product fast can help you learn from your users faster. For example, let's say you have these assumptions and hypotheses about your users. You think that if I do X, my users are going to do Y. If I ship this feature, my users are going to pay 50% more than what they're paying now just for this feature. If you want to test that out, asking users the question of whether they'll be willing to pay more or not for this feature is not the way to go. You want to ship a minimal version of this product and see if users, say, pay 20% more for this bare bones version of what they want. If they do, then that is a sign you should be building on this feature that you've launched, and then see if users eventually pay 50% or even more than what they're paying now for this added feature to your product. This is how you want to be developing product. You want to have these experiments running in the background and then shipping product as fast as possible so that you can actually realize outcomes for these experiments, because there's really no point in guessing if your user is going to do a certain thing. You have to actually be building something for your product so that users can actually act or not act. Both outcomes are extremely useful for you to learn from your users in order to keep improving upon your product. So those are 3 co-founder mistakes that I see come up quite often. Just my time working in startups and now with my own startup. These mistakes I've personally made in working with other co-founders in the past. So I know that these mistakes can be extremely damaging, but they're not easy to avoid. It's not like this is so obvious and so simplistic such that, oh, if I know these 3 mistakes, then I'm going to avoid them automatically. That is absolutely not how this works. You want to be always on guard when it comes to these mistakes, and it just takes a lot of practice to stop making these mistakes.